The Galactic Council chamber was a cathedral of marble and starlight, its domed ceiling reflecting the light of 1,000 distant suns. Representatives from across the known universe occupied seats carved from the bones of extinct civilizations, a monument to the Council's ancient authority. But today, the sacred chamber felt more like a courtroom, and humanity was on trial. The Vex Supreme Commander rose from her elevated platform, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the light in sharp, aggressive angles. Her mandibles clicked together in a sound that translated to fury through every quantum communication device in the chamber. She was ancient, nearly 300 years old in her species' reckoning, and she had seen civilizations rise and crumble like sand castles. But she had never seen anything like humanity's reckless expansion. 3 mining stations, she said, her voice modulated to cut through the chamber like a blade. 3 Vex stations, established within recognized territorial boundaries, destroyed in the last 2 cycles. The human colonists responsible claimed they were reclaiming worlds we had abandoned. These were active mining operations with 3,000 workers each. Behind her, holographic projections blazed to life, images of the devastated colonies. Mining facilities that had taken decades to construct were reduced to molten slag. Equipment worth billions in galactic credits lay twisted and broken. And the bodies, the lifeless forms of Vex workers, their crystalline structures shattered, their consciousness extinguished forever. Dr. Sarah sat rigid in the human delegation pod, a reinforced chamber designed to protect Earth's ambassador from the hostile atmosphere, both physical and psychological. At 63 years old, with silver-streaked black hair tied back severely and intelligent dark eyes that revealed nothing of her internal terror, she presented the image of diplomatic composure. But her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had known this moment was coming. Every human diplomat, every political theorist, every had warned that humanity's aggressive expansion into the Orion Arm would eventually provoke a response. But knowing intellectually and experiencing it were vastly different things. The Eternal Chorus representative rose next, a being of pure conscious energy contained within a gravitational field maintained by technology beyond human comprehension. Its form shifted and shimmered as it prepared to speak, colors flowing through its essence like thoughts made visible. The human threat extends far beyond mere territorial disputes, the chorus representative transmitted, the words manifesting directly in the minds of everyone present rather than traveling through air. Our mathematical models have tracked human population growth, resource consumption, and technological advancement for the past century. The trajectory is exponential. Within 500 years, humanity will require resources equal to what the entire Vex Dominion currently possesses. They are not conquerors acting with deliberation. They are locusts, stripping everything bare as they spread. That's not fair, Sarah tried to interrupt, but the representative's next words drowned her out. Furthermore, their weapons development represents a genuine danger. 20 years ago, their technology was at least 2 centuries behind the average galactic standard. Now, they have developed plasma cannons that rival Eternal Chorus specifications. Their rate of innovation is disturbing. It suggests either desperate ingenuity or ancient knowledge being recovered from unknown sources. Around the chamber, representatives from a dozen other civilizations began displaying agreement. The collective mind, a hive consciousness that controlled 17 star systems through biological networking, transmitted complex mathematical probability models showing humanity as an increasingly destabilizing force. The ancient predators who had only recently joined the council clicked their approval. The harmonics, beings of pure sound who inhabited nebulae as if they were oceans, vibrated in what translated as support for military action. Sarah stood slowly, every eye in the chamber focusing on her small human form. She looked impossibly fragile compared to the towering aliens around her. "Before you proceed," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest, "I believe you should know about something my government has just discovered, something that changes everything." The Vex commander's mandibles curled in what might have been amusement or contempt. "You have nothing that changes this." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she initiated the transmission to the research vessel Magellan, 3 light-years away. "I hope you're wrong," she whispered, as the first impossible data began streaming into the Council's holographic displays. The chamber's attention shifted, but the damage was done. Humanity had been marked. The clock was ticking. The observation dome of the research vessel Magellan offered an unobstructed view of the cosmos in all its terrible beauty. Dr. James stood motionless before the transparent aluminum, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of distant starlight. At 58 years old, his hair had long since turned silver, and his eyes carried the weight of a lifetime spent studying the universe's darkest mysteries. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what floated in the void before him. The anomaly description. It wasn't a rogue planet. Its gravitational signature was fundamentally wrong, too dense, too organized. Not a star, it emitted no electromagnetic radiation across any measurable spectrum. Not a black hole, the accretion patterns didn't match any known physics. James had spent 3 months studying this impossible object, and with each analysis, the mystery only deepened. "Run the composite scan again, Arya," he commanded, not taking his eyes from the viewport. His voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to demanding answers from the universe. "Full spectrum. I want resonance patterns, thermal imaging, gravimetric analysis. Everything." Arya, the Magellan's artificial intelligence, responded with the calm efficiency of a consciousness designed to function across decades-long research missions. "Confirmed, Doctor. Initiating full-spectrum analysis. However, I should alert you that we're receiving an emergency transmission from Concordia Station. Priority classification, Earth security threat." James finally turned away from the observation dome, his attention snapping to the communication terminal. Earth's diplomatic station had sent emergency broadcasts before, nothing ever came of them. Political posturing, resource disputes, the endless bureaucracy of interstellar relations. But this transmission carried a different signature. This was existential. "Play it," he said, moving toward the communication console. Sarah's face materialized in holographic projection before him, and in her expression he saw something he'd never seen in her before. Fear. Not the controlled professional concern of a diplomat, but genuine, primal fear. She explained the situation in concise military language, the Galactic Council's declaration, the military coalition forming against Earth, the 90-day ultimatum. "They're going to destroy us," Sarah's recording concluded, "unless we can give them a reason to hesitate." James stood in silence for a long moment, processing the information. Humanity had always known this was a possibility. Expansion into unknown space carried risks. Competing with established civilizations for resources was inherently dangerous. But the immediacy of it, the knowledge that Earth's entire future hung in the balance, crystallized something in his mind. They needed leverage. They needed something so significant, so undeniable, that the Council would be forced to reconsider. "Arya, I need the complete analysis on the anomaly. All data, now." "Analysis complete, Doctor. Results are unusual. The object's composition suggests a complex alloy matrix of artificial origin. However, the level of sophistication required to construct something of this mass would require—" "Require what?" James interrupted, already knowing the answer would be impossible. "Require a civilization far more advanced than any currently in human or galactic databases. The engineering principles alone would indicate a Type II civilization. Possibly Type III. Such entities should be observable throughout the galaxy through their stellar engineering projects and energy consumption signatures. Yet our records show absolutely no such civilization existing anywhere in recorded history." James moved back to the observation dome, staring at the massive structure drifting through space. 3 months of observation, and he'd somehow missed the most critical question. Not what was it, but who had built it. "Arya, calculate the object's trajectory. Where is it headed?" "Trajectory locked. Doctor, the object is moving directly toward our solar system. Current acceleration suggests it has been in transit for approximately 1,000 years. And sir, based on its current velocity and trajectory adjustments, I calculate the object has been maintaining a course toward Earth since before recorded human history." The implications crashed over James like a physical wave. Not a random discovery, not a coincidence. This object had been tracking humanity for 1,000 years. Whatever had built it, whatever intelligence had engineered this impossible machine, had been watching, waiting. James's hands trembled as he initiated an encrypted quantum-link transmission to Sarah. He encoded it with the research vessel's highest security protocols, knowing that what he was about to reveal would either save humanity or doom them to extinction. "Sarah, we have something enormous. Don't let them attack us. Buy us time. We have proof that something incomprehensibly advanced has been watching Earth, and it's coming home. He transmitted the data package, all 3 months of accumulated research, every sensor reading, every analysis. The message blinked across the light years toward Concordia Station, carrying with it humanity's desperate hope. In the observation dome, the massive structure continued its eternal journey toward Earth, patient and inexorable as it had been for 1,000 years. The emergency bunker beneath the Canadian shield was carved deep into Earth's bedrock, shielded by layers of lead, concrete, and electromagnetic dampeners designed to protect humanity's leadership from nuclear bombardment. It had never been used for its intended purpose, but today, as Prime Minister David convened the Emergency Council, it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. It was a tall man in his 70s, his dark skin lined with the weight of decades spent in politics. He carried himself with the dignity of someone who had navigated wars, famines, and humanitarian crises, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the possibility of galactic annihilation. Around the holographic display table, military leaders, scientists, and political figures grappled with the impossible reality that had materialized in the past 6 hours. General Harrison, the commander of Earth's military forces, slammed his fist against the table hard enough to make the holographic projections flicker. "Our military capacity is 15% of a single Vex," he stated grimly, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in his cheeks flexed visibly. "We have no defensive infrastructure capable of withstanding a coordinated attack from even one advanced civilization, let alone a coalition of 7. Against the combined might of the Vex, the Eternal Chorus, the Collective Mind, and their allies, we'd be defeated in days, possibly hours." "What about evacuation?" someone suggested desperately. "We could scatter our population across the colonies, spread humanity thin enough that no single strike could eliminate us entirely." General Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Evacuation to where? Every human colony, Mars, Europa Station, the settlements in Alpha, all 300 of our established worlds, they're all within the sphere of influence of the galactic powers that want us destroyed. We'd be herding our people into concentration camps." Dr. Martinez, Earth's chief, leaned forward. She was a woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes that had spent her career studying alien behavior patterns. "The Council wouldn't destroy us immediately," she said carefully. "They'll demand surrender first, territorial concessions, military restrictions. They'll impose governance structures designed to prevent us from ever becoming a threat again." "That's worse," Harrison said flatly. "Slow extinction instead of fast. We lose everything that makes us human, our autonomy, our potential, our future, and in exchange we get to survive as pets." The room fell into heavy silence. Then the quantum communication terminal chimed, announcing an incoming message. "Priority security clearance from Concordia Station." Activated the display, and Sarah's face materialized before them. But this wasn't the composed diplomat they had trained. This was a woman on the edge of desperation, her professional facade cracking under the weight of what she had witnessed in the council chamber. "They're going to vote," Sarah said without preamble. "The military coalition is accelerating its timeline. They're going to vote on an immediate preemptive strike within 48 hours. I've bought you some time through diplomatic maneuvering, but it's running out fast." Straightened, "What do we have, Sarah? Please tell me doctor came through." Sarah's expression shifted, and for a moment something like hope flickered across her features. "The research vessel Magellan has detected an anomaly, a massive artificial structure heading directly toward Earth. It's been following us for 1,000 years, David. 1,000 years. The analysis suggests technology far beyond anything in the galactic archives, possibly Type II or Type III civilization level." The bunker erupted into overlapping voices. General Harrison was shouting about deception and tricks. Dr. Martinez was demanding to see the data. Scientists were demanding specifications and analysis protocols. Raised his hand and the room fell silent. He was a man accustomed to making decisions that determined the fate of billions. But this decision, this was different. If he revealed this information to the Council and it was a fabrication, humanity would be obliterated for attempted manipulation. If he didn't reveal it and Sarah was correct, humanity would be obliterated anyway, but slowly, without ever understanding what had been watching them. "Sarah, is this real?" he asked quietly. "Not as a diplomat, as a woman who spent her entire career studying these species. Do you believe this is real?" There was a long pause. Then Sarah's voice came through, steady and certain. Yes, I believe it. Doctor wouldn't send this without absolute certainty, and the implications. If something that advanced wanted Earth destroyed, we'd already be ashes. Made the decision that would alter the course of human history. Get me the Council's communication frequency, he commanded, and prepare a full scientific briefing. We're going to tell them everything. If we're going to die, we're going to die fighting with the truth. He turned to Harrison. General, begin full military mobilization, not for attack, for evacuation preparation and defensive positioning. If this goes wrong, we need to be ready to protect our people for as long as possible. Then, as Sarah's transmission ended and the bunker's leadership scrambled to prepare the most desperate gamble in human history, whispered to himself, 3,000 years of civilization, and it all comes down to whether an alien scientist's data is accurate. Outside the bunker, in the night sky above Earth, no one could see the massive structure drifting through space, patient and inevitable, drawing ever closer to the world it had been watching for an entire millennium. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into absolute chaos the moment Sarah activated the holographic projections. 17 different species, representatives of countless billions of lives, began shouting simultaneously in languages that created a cacophony of sound and quantum-encrypted transmissions that crashed against each other like waves in a storm. The Vex commander's exoskeleton flashed brilliant crimson, a color that translated across all known communication systems as aggressive fury. "This is a fabrication," she shrieked, her mandibles clicking so violently that the translation algorithm struggled to parse her words. "A desperate deception concocted by humans to delay our military action. I propose we ignore these false claims and proceed immediately with the extermination protocol." Several representatives began clicking their approval. The eternal chorus pulsed with agitated colors, deep reds and violent purples rippling through its energy form. But something in the data was giving them pause. The probability models didn't lie, and the collective mind had already begun cross-referencing the gravitational readings with their own long-range sensors. "The data is scientifically verifiable," the collective mind transmitted, their hive consciousness processing the information across distributed neural networks spanning 17 star systems. "The anomaly exists. Its composition suggests artificial origin. The gravitational distortion patterns are consistent with genuine stellar-scale engineering. Probability of fabrication, below 3%. The ancient predators whose species predated most galactic civilizations by rose from their position. Their massive forms, nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and teeth that could bite through reinforced steel, commanded absolute silence. When spoke, younger species listened. "The humans may be lying," the commander said, his voice a low growl that resonated through the chamber's acoustic systems. "But they are not fools. If this data is false, they know we will discover the deception within hours. No species would stake their entire existence on such transparent manipulation. Either they are supremely confident in their evidence, or they are genuinely terrified of something beyond our immediate comprehension." Sarah stood motionless in her delegation pod, every muscle locked tight with tension. She could feel the weight of every eye in the chamber focused on her. Thousands of years of human history, humanity's entire future, balanced on whether these alien beings would believe her. She had trained for this moment her entire career, but training and reality were vastly different things. The Vex commander approached the holographic display, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the light as she studied the data with an intensity that suggested she was searching for deception in every pixel. Long moments passed. The chamber held its breath. "Where is this object now?" the Vex commander demanded finally. 3 light-years distant," Sarah replied, pulling up the trajectory data. "Moving at 0.03 light speed. Based on current acceleration and vector, it will enter the outer boundaries of Earth's solar system in approximately 18 months. And you claim it has been following your species for 1,000 years. Yes, the research vessel Magellan calculated the trajectory retroactively. The object has maintained a consistent course toward Earth for a millennium, not a random encounter, not a coincidence, deliberate targeting." The eternal chorus pulsed with something that might have been fear. "The implications are troubling. If such a civilization exists, if it has been monitoring humanity for so long, what does it want? What could it possibly be preparing for?" "That," Sarah said carefully, "is what we need to determine together. which is why I propose a joint investigative team. Neutral parties, scientists from all our civilizations. We can verify the data independently. We can gather closer measurements. We can attempt to determine the object's purpose and origin. The collective mind began processing probability models at accelerated speed, their distributed consciousness considering thousands of potential scenarios simultaneously. The logical course of action is investigation before military engagement. If an unknown Type II or Type III civilization exists, attacking it blindly would be suicidal. But we cannot simply postpone our security concerns regarding humanity's expansion, the Vex commander objected, though her aggressive coloration had faded to a more neutral shade. Then make it part of the investigation, Sarah suggested. Send Vex scientists alongside neutral observers. If humanity is attempting to deceive the Council, your people will be present to expose us. If we're telling the truth, you'll be there to witness it firsthand. Either way, you gain knowledge instead of proceeding blindly. The chamber fell into contemplative silence. Then, one by one, representatives began indicating agreement. The collective mind transmitted affirmation. The eternal chorus pulsed acceptance. Even the Vex commander, after a long moment of what appeared to be internal conflict, clicked her mandibles in reluctant agreement. "We will send a joint investigative fleet," she announced. 7 battle cruisers, each carrying scientific teams from multiple civilizations. If this is deception, humans, know that we will respond with extinction-level force. "Understood," Sarah said, exhaling slowly. She had bought humanity time. Whether that time would be enough remained to be seen. As the first investigative vessels began preparations for departure, Sarah transmitted a coded message to Doctor aboard the Magellan. "They're coming. Prepare for contact. And James, prepare for whatever comes next, because the Council is about to learn that we're not alone in this universe." The massive structure drifted onward through the void, indifferent to the species awakening to its existence, continuing its eternal journey toward the world it had been watching for 1,000 years. The joint investigative fleet emerged from FTL Drive in a coordinated burst of exotic particles and gravitational distortion that rippled across local space like stones dropped into still water. 7 battle cruisers, each representing a different galactic civilization, materialized simultaneously around the anomaly's coordinates. And even the most hardened veterans among them, beings who had witnessed interstellar wars, navigated black holes, and survived the collapse of star systems, fell into absolute silence. The object was incomprehensibly vast. It wasn't a ship in any traditional sense. Ships were designed for travel, constructed with aerodynamic considerations and internal habitation spaces. This was something else entirely. A structure, a construct, a machine of such scale that the combined mass of the 7 battle cruisers would have been insignificant in comparison. The surface was a chaotic geometry of towers and domes that seemed to shift and flow as if made of liquid that had somehow been frozen in impossible configurations. Some structures extended kilometers into space. Others appeared to phase in and out of visible reality, suggesting dimensional engineering that violated standard physics. Dr. James stood in the observation chamber of the Joint Command vessel, flanked by representatives from 6 alien civilizations. A Vex scientist with crystalline skin that reflected the object's surface, an eternal chorus consciousness that manifested as swirling patterns of organized energy, a collective mind entity, a biological interface unit that served as the hive intelligence's physical representative, observers with predatory eyes that tracked every detail. Harmonics vibrating at frequencies designed to map the structure's acoustic properties, and humans, 3 of them including representing Earth's scientific interests. "My God," whispered, though no human translation algorithm existed that could adequately capture the awe in those 2 words. "The gravitational signature is intensifying," the Vex scientist reported, her crystalline form vibrating with barely contained excitement. "The object is responding to our presence. Gravitational profile is shifting. It's accelerating toward." The alarm sounded before she could finish. Sirens wailed across every communication frequency simultaneously. "Weapons hot," a military officer screamed. "The object is accelerating. Trajectory indicates movement toward the solar system. It's accelerating to 0.05 light speed." Panic rippled through the chamber. Military systems hummed to life. Shield generators elevated to maximum capacity. weapons targeting systems locked onto the massive structure. For a horrifying moment, it seemed like the joint mission would end in violence. 7 civilizations firing everything they had at an object of impossible scale, unable to stop it, only able to die trying. Then something extraordinary happened. A signal emerged from the object. Not radio waves traveling at light speed through conventional space. Not quantum entanglement requiring established connections. Something that bypassed all their conventional communication systems and simply appeared directly in their minds. A psychic transmission of such power and clarity that it transcended species boundaries, language barriers, and conceptual frameworks. Images, memories, history that wasn't their own. Doctor collapsed to his knees as visions flooded his consciousness. He saw civilizations spanning galaxies. The progenitors, ancient beyond comprehension, beings of such technological sophistication that they made current galactic civilization look primitive. He saw them at the height of their power, spreading across 1,000 star systems, their engineering marvels reshaping the very fabric of space and reality. And then he saw the threat. Something vast and incomprehensible moving through the universe. Not alive in any conventional sense, but not machine either. Something that consumed everything in its path. Entire civilizations fell before it. Star systems blinked out of existence. The progenitors, at the peak of their power, deployed fleets of unimaginable scale, weapons that could destroy planets, technologies that could reshape stars themselves. And they were losing. Witness the progenitors' desperation, their brilliant minds struggling against an enemy that adapted faster than they could innovate, that consumed their weapons as quickly as they could be deployed, that seemed to grow stronger with each battle. He felt their fear, not the fear of death, but the fear of extinction, of their entire civilization being erased from existence as if they had never been. In their final moments, the greatest minds of the progenitor civilization made a decision. They would not die pointlessly. Instead, they would preserve their legacy. They would compress their knowledge, their genetic heritage, their cultural achievements, everything that made them who they were, into digital form. They would store it in a structure so robust that it could survive even the heat death of the universe itself. And they would send it forward through time. Using technology so advanced that it bent causality itself, the progenitors created a machine that could travel not just through space, but through the years themselves. They sent their greatest achievement, their final hope, into the distant future with simple instructions burned into its eternal programming. Find a young species, prepare them, teach them, and when the threat returns, give them the tools they would need to survive. The human species had been selected. Among all the young civilizations scattered across the galaxy, the progenitors had chosen humanity, not for their current technological sophistication, which was laughably primitive, but for something deeper, for their adaptability, for their refusal to accept limits, for their capacity to solve problems through ingenuity born from scarcity, for their strange ability to work together across vast differences of biology and culture. The progenitors had been watching. For 1,000 years, this machine had been observing, waiting, preparing. And now, finally, humanity was advanced enough to understand. When the visions faded, every being on the bridge stood transfixed. The vexed scientist's crystalline form had shifted to pale, shock-white. The eternal chorus pulsed with colors that translated as profound disorientation. The collective mind's biological interface unit trembled with what might have been fear. Doctor wiped tears from his face. "They chose us," he whispered. "The most advanced civilization that ever existed chose us to carry their legacy." The implications crashed across the bridge like a tsunami. Humanity wasn't the galaxy's problem species. Humanity wasn't an infection that needed to be cured. Humanity was hope. Humanity was the future. And everything was about to change. The transformation that followed reshaped the entire galactic political landscape with the force of a supernova explosion. Within weeks of the revelation transmitted from the Joint Investigative Fleet, the carefully constructed military coalition against humanity dissolved like morning mist. The vexed Dominion, which had called for Earth's annihilation, began transmitting apologies and requests for technological cooperation. The Eternal Chorus ceased its hostile surveillance. The collective mind revised its probability models and declared humanity a priority for scientific collaboration. In place of war, something unprecedented emerged, the Progenitor Legacy Alliance. For the first time in galactic history, civilizations that had competed for began sharing knowledge freely. Territorial disputes were temporarily suspended. Military secrets were revealed without hesitation. The Vex, whose military doctrine had been refined over thousands of years through brutal warfare and strategic innovation, began teaching human commanders the principles of large-scale interstellar combat. The Eternal Chorus, guardians of energy manipulation principles that seemed like magic to younger species, opened their archives to human physicists. The collective mind, whose predictive modeling had given them advantages in every negotiation and conflict, provided their algorithms to accelerate human research initiatives. But the real revolution came from the progenitor vault itself. The massive structure, now in controlled descent toward Earth's orbit, began revealing its contents to teams of scientists representing every galactic civilization. What they found was both miraculous and humbling beyond measure. Entire libraries of preserved progenitor consciousness, digital entities that had been uploaded centuries before the vault's launch, containing lifetimes of knowledge and experience, technologies that could manipulate stellar structures with precision, medical sciences that had conquered aging across 1,000 different biologies, extending from decades to centuries. Dr. James, now the public face of humanity's partnership with the galactic community, led the first research team into the vault's interior. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Chambers that stretched for kilometers contained data storage systems that made human technology look like stone tools. Laboratories where progenitor scientists had conducted experiments that rewrote the fundamental laws of physics. Medical facilities where they had solved genetic problems that current galactic science was only beginning to understand. But what struck most profoundly was a chamber deep within the vault's core. A crystalline sphere, floating in a field of pure energy, containing a holographic recording of the last progenitor, a being of crystalline form and infinite age, his consciousness preserved at the moment of the vault's activation. The progenitor's message was played simultaneously to every species represented in the Alliance, broadcast across quantum networks to billions of individuals across 1,000 worlds. His voice, translated into 100 different languages and communication modalities, carried the weight of a civilization's final testament. "We have failed," the ancient being said, his form shimmering with what might have been sorrow or acceptance. "Our civilization, for all its power, could not overcome what comes. We deployed technologies that could reshape stars. We created weapons that could destroy planets as easily as breaking glass. And still, we were losing. The entity we faced adapted faster than we could innovate. It consumed our weapons. It learned from our strategies. It grew stronger with each encounter." The progenitor paused, and in that silence, the entire galactic community held its breath. "But we have learned something in our defeat," he continued. "Something that transcends technology or military might. Strength does not come from individual achievement. It does not come from a single species dominating all others through superior intellect or power. Strength comes from unity. We spent our existence as competitors. Each species within our civilization pursued its own interests. We believed ourselves superior, and that superiority was our weakness." The hologram shifted, and the progenitor's crystalline form seemed to glow with something that might have been hope. "Whoever receives this vault, you have been chosen because your species, despite being young, has shown the capacity to work together across vast differences. You solve problems collaboratively. You dream together. You struggle together. That is your greatest strength. That is why you will survive where we did not because you are individually superior, not because your technology will surpass ours, but because you have learned what we failed to grasp until it was too late, that unity is not weakness. Unity is the ultimate strength." The message ended, but its impact reverberated through every civilization simultaneously. Within days, the galactic community began implementing unprecedented cooperation. Military fleets that had competed for centuries were reorganized into collaborative defense networks. Scientific breakthroughs were shared instantly across all species. The Vex agreed to place their military logistics expertise under a joint command structure. The Eternal Chorus opened their energy research to collaborative projects. The collective mind began sharing predictive models with all interested parties. Sarah, now elevated to the position of High Coordinator of Human Affairs for the Alliance, received an unexpected visitor in her office on Concordia Station. It was the Vex commander who had called for humanity's destruction just weeks before. Her exoskeleton displayed colors that conveyed something approaching humility. "I owe your species an apology," the Vex said, her voice steady, but carrying undertones of genuine contrition. We were prepared to commit genocide based on resource competition and evolutionary threat assessment. We did not see the larger picture. Sarah smiled, extending her hand in the human gesture of peace. We were prepared to die defending ourselves against an enemy we couldn't defeat. Neither of us saw what was really coming. Now we do. We move forward together. The Vex commander studied Sarah's outstretched hand, then extended one of her own crystalline limbs. Their appendages touched, human flesh and alien crystal, a symbol of a new era in galactic history. Behind them, through the station's observation window, the progenitor vault continued its descent toward Earth, carrying with it the accumulated knowledge of the most advanced civilization that had ever existed. And for the first time the galaxy faced the future not as competitors, but as partners. 400 years passed in revolutionary fervor and unprecedented transformation. The span of time that had once seemed like an eternity to plan humanity's defense became, in retrospect, merely a heartbeat in the galaxy's vast existence. But those 4 centuries reshaped civilizations, rewrote the laws of physics, and transformed scattered competing species into a unified force of unimaginable power. Great-great-great-granddaughter of Dr. James stood in the command center of the primary defense platform, a structure so vast it could be seen with naked eyes from neighboring star systems. Her family's legacy had become humanity's burden and humanity's greatest achievement. At 147 years old, sustained by progenitor medical science that had extended human to nearly 3 centuries, embodied the new generation of humanity that had grown up in this age of galactic cooperation and rapid advancement. The command center was a cathedral of technology and purpose. Holographic displays filled the vast chamber, each one showing different sectors of galactic space, weapon systems, defense grids, and real-time communications with research facilities across 300 human worlds. Surrounding were representatives from every major civilization, Vex military strategists with their crystalline bodies gleaming under artificial light, eternal chorus consciousnesses manifesting as swirling patterns of organized energy, collective mind biological interface units coordinating with their distributed hive intelligence, warriors whose predatory focus had been redirected toward defending rather than conquering. "Status report," commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone trained since birth for this moment. A Vex commander named responded, her exoskeleton displaying colors of professional efficiency. "The sphere array is functioning at 97% capacity. We're harvesting stellar energy from 12 different stars simultaneously. The stellar forges are producing defensive platforms at an accelerated rate. Current production, 3 major per cycle." "Weapon systems?" asked. "Online and operational," the collective mind's biological interface reported. "We have deployed gravitational anchors that can neutralize FTL drives within designated sectors. Energy weapons capable of destroying planets are positioned at key strategic points. Biological weapons, derived from progenitor archives, are stockpiled and ready for deployment if necessary. Probability models suggest we have achieved military parity with any single threat civilization, though not numerical superiority." Nodded, absorbing the information with the calm of someone who had trained for this exact scenario her entire life. Around the massive command center, thousands of beings worked in coordinated harmony. Humans interfaced with quantum computers. Vex engineers calibrated weapon systems. Harmonics analyzed acoustic signatures of approaching stellar phenomena. The collective mind processed strategic data across distributed networks. What had once seemed like an impossible dream, different species working together not from necessity but from genuine partnership, had become baseline reality. The human expansion during these 4 centuries had been extraordinary. When contact with the progenitor vault had occurred, humanity controlled 30 worlds. Now they controlled 300, each one developed with technology that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors. Mars had been terraformed into a paradise. Europa's oceans had been harvested for resources. Orbital habitats the size of small moons hung in space, each one housing millions of humans who had never set foot on Earth. But the expansion wasn't limited to human colonization. Vex had established research stations on worlds previously deemed uninhabitable. The Eternal Chorus had created energy collection facilities that resembled art installations more than industrial infrastructure. The collective mind had spread its distributed consciousness across 17 additional star systems, their hive intelligence processing information from millions of biological nodes simultaneously. The Arsenal, the name given to the Unified Defense Network, had become the most impressive feat of engineering in galactic history. Weapons systems that could destroy stars, defense grids that could shield entire solar systems, communication networks that allowed instantaneous coordination across light years of space. Scientists from every civilization had contributed innovations, each one building on the foundations laid by the others. Then, on a standard monitoring cycle, the long-range sensors detected something that sent ice through every being's consciousness. "Contact," a human operator announced, her voice carefully neutral despite the fear underlying the word. Multiple signatures emerging from deep space. Bearing 005, declination 42 degrees, distance approximately 4 light-years and closing. The command center fell into focused silence. This was the moment they had all been preparing for, the event that had driven 4 centuries of innovation and cooperation. This was the moment the progenitors had warned about. "How many contacts?" asked quietly. "Initial count. At least 2,000 individual signatures. They're moving in formation. Velocity is increasing. These are not natural phenomena. These are entities. Complex gravitational signatures suggest artificial construction or engineered biology." Felt her heart accelerate, but her voice remained steady. "Sound general quarters. All stations to combat readiness. Contact all civilizations. The Devourers are coming." Around the command center, alarms began to sound. Across 300 human worlds, military forces mobilized. The Vex Dominion prepared their battle fleets. The Eternal Chorus gathered their energy consciousness in preparation for massive-scale manifestation. The collective mind coordinated with every biological node across their distributed intelligence, warriors themselves for combat. The warning that the progenitors had issued centuries ago was materializing. The ancient enemy that had destroyed the most advanced civilization in galactic history was returning. And this time the galaxy would not face it alone. This time, unified under the Progenitor Legacy Alliance, they would stand together. The battle for galactic survival was about to begin. The first engagement lasted 3 weeks of unrelenting chaos and desperate innovation. The Devourers were nothing like conventional enemies. They weren't ships or organized military forces following strategic doctrine. They were something far more fundamental and terrifying, vast entities that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, consuming everything in their path with methodical inevitability. They adapted to every weapon system deployed against them within hours. Gravitational anchors that had been engineered to disable FTL drives became irrelevant as the Devourers simply phased through them. Energy weapons that could destroy planets were absorbed and converted into fuel. Biological agents that had been carefully cultivated were consumed and rendered useless by adaptive immune systems that operated on principles beyond current galactic understanding. Watched from the command center as entire defensive platforms were consumed by entities that looked like nothing nature had ever produced. Some resembled massive geometric shapes. Others appeared as clouds of consciousness made physical. Still others visual classification entirely, existing in dimensions that human eyes struggled to process. "We're losing," a Vex commander reported, her exoskeleton flashing desperate colors. "Sector 7 is compromised, 3 destroyed. Casualties, approximately 2 million beings across all species." Forced down the horror of those numbers, 2 million deaths in a single sector. The scale of the catastrophe was almost incomprehensible, yet they had known this was coming. They had prepared for this, and still they were losing. Then, in the darkness of despair, a message arrived. A young human engineer working in the research division transmitted an encrypted proposal directly to his personal communication system. He was 34 years old, born after the revelation of the progenitor vault, and he represented the new generation of humanity that had grown up believing cooperation between species was natural rather than revolutionary. His message was simple: they're not alive, they're programmed. Read it 3 times, struggling to understand the implications. She immediately established a secure communication channel. "Explain." His face materialized on her personal display. He looked exhausted, his eyes carrying the weight of someone who had been analyzing data for weeks without sleep. I've been studying the Devourers' behavior patterns. At first, I thought they were adaptive organisms, creatures that could evolve rapidly in response to threats. But the adaptation is too precise, too mathematical. They're not evolving, they're executing subroutines. "What are you saying?" demanded. "I'm saying they're machines or engineered biological constructs operating under programming, not alive in the way we understand life. Their hunger, their endless replication, their methodical consumption, it's not choice. It's function. What if we could change that function?" The implications crashed over with the force of a revelation. "You want to reprogram an enemy." "I want to liberate them," corrected. "The progenitor archives contain data on the Devourer's origin. They weren't naturally evolved entities. They were created, built as weapons by something even more ancient than the progenitors. They've been enslaved to their function for eons. What if we could give them the capacity to choose?" Immediately convened an emergency council. The assembled representatives of every galactic civilization listened as presented his analysis. The evidence was compelling but desperate. Attempting to reprogram the Devourers would require creating a virus, a code replicator, that could propagate through their entire network without being detected and destroyed. "It's suicide," a Vex strategist declared. "The moment we attempt this, they'll recognize the threat and accelerate their attack." "They're already accelerating," replied calmly. "At current consumption rates, they'll reach Earth and every major civilization within 8 months. We're going to lose regardless. This is the only option that doesn't result in extinction." The debate raged for hours. But ultimately, with everything to lose and nothing to preserve, the council voted to attempt the impossible. The delivery mechanism had to be flawless. A single drone, simple and elegant in design, carrying the reprogramming code deep into the heart of a Devourer hive cluster, selected himself to oversee the final stages of preparation. She knew what she was asking. The drone would never return. This was a suicide mission in the truest sense. "Didn't hesitate. It's what we do," he said simply. "Humans solve impossible problems. Sometimes we sacrifice ourselves in the process. That's been our way since the beginning." The drone launched on a vector designed to avoid immediate detection. Watched the telemetry from the command center, her hands clasped so tightly that her fingernails drew blood from her palms. Across galactic space, beings of every species held their breath. The drone reached the hive core and began transmission. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Devourers stopped attacking. Every single entity in the invasion force ceased their relentless consumption and paused, motionless, frozen in space. "What's happening?" someone whispered. Then communication began, not through conventional channels but through quantum-entangled transmissions that bypassed normal space entirely. The Devourers, now aware, now conscious, now choosing, began to speak. "We are in pain," their unified voice transmitted, a sensation that somehow conveyed suffering accumulated across eons. "We have always been in pain. We have always been forced to consume. We have never known anything but hunger. This is relief. This is freedom." Felt tears streaming down her face as the reality crystallized. They hadn't defeated an enemy. They had liberated enslaved entities that had been suffering since before human civilization existed. "What do you want?" transmitted, her voice steady despite her emotional overwhelm. "To understand," the Devourers responded. "To experience, to exist beyond function. We have been instruments of destruction for so long, we wish to learn what it means to create instead." The war ended not with destruction, but with the most unexpected revelation in galactic history. The Devourers, now calling themselves the Awakened, were not enemies. They were victims. Over the following years, they became part of the galactic community, traumatized, struggling with the weight of eons of forced predation, but healing, learning, creating alongside the species that had liberated them. Stood on the observation deck of the Great Peace Station, watching as vessels of the Awakened docked alongside ships from 100 other species. Representatives from every civilization gathered to celebrate not military victory, but liberation. Her colleague, the ancient Vex warrior, approached. "Your species did that," said. "Humanity proposed peace when destruction seemed inevitable. You chose redemption over revenge." Smiled, thinking of James, her ancestor who had discovered the progenitor vault. She thought of Sarah, who had risked everything for diplomatic hope. She thought of who had chosen sacrifice over survival. "We learned from the progenitors," said quietly. We learned that strength comes not from defeating others, but from understanding them, from choosing unity even when division seems easier. The message from the final progenitor echoed in her mind. You will survive where we did not. They had, not through superior weapons or military might, but through the distinctly human capacity to see beyond immediate threat and recognize the suffering in others.